Welcome to the Student Success Podcast. I'm Al Solano, founder of the Continuous Learning Institute, or CLI, a higher education online resource focused on providing community college and open access university educators with practical information on how to get results at their campus. As a resource within CLI, the Student Success Podcast is focused on just that, the challenges, opportunities, failures, and successes of practices intended to improve student success and equity. The goal is to leave you with thought-provoking ideas, nuts and bolts information, and or lessons learned from the field so you can consider how you might apply them to your institutional context. For today's podcast, it's a privilege to have Dr. Michael Baston. Dr. Baston is the 7th president of Rockland Community College in New York. His work to improve student success has been featured on MSNBC, the Chronicle of Higher Education, The Atlantic, the Community College Times, and Black Enterprise Magazine. He's also contributing author to Race, Education, and Reintegrating Formerly Incarcerated Citizens and the Handbook for Student Affairs in Community Colleges. Thank you so much for being on the Student Success Podcast, Michael.
Al, good to be with you. You know, you're my brother from another mother. We are Queens natives together. And so I'm so proud to be with you. And you're doing so many great works to educate our community. So I'm so glad to be with you today.
Oh, you don't even know how much that means to me. That really does. So we met, it was March of 2019. We were in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. And I remember hearing you speak, and I was like, oh, we got to have dinner. And we had dinner that evening, and we found out we were from almost the same neighborhood.
That's right.
And we graduated high school the same year. And because, the 70s and 80s in Queens and Brooklyn was an interesting time.
That's a good word.
So we have kind of these shared experiences as kids. And I just connected with you right away on that level, but also, in terms of getting results for students, equity and change, and we just are like-minded, and so I'm so excited to have you here. I want to, before we get with any questions, I just, for the audience, is there anything beyond all of your experience in higher ed, all the great things you've done, anything personal? Anything about you that the audience should know about?
Well, I don't want to brag, but I am an avid golfer. I love golf. Miniature golf, that is. Oh, I like to travel because when I travel, I look for a miniature golf course wherever I go so that I can get my putts in. I'm not a big course person, but I do like the mini golf. That's something that I'm interested in.
So is there, when you go to these golf courses, you have different monuments and windmills. So do you have a favorite?
Anywhere where you can actually have a scenic route. I love to go to, there are some pretty amazing mini golf courses in the country that have all kinds of themes, whether there's the haunted house theme, there's a park theme, there's I love to see the creativity of those who decided to put this together, and it's just good fun. And I enjoy, fun. My mantra for 2021 is, at the end of the day, we got to have some fun in 2021. We couldn't do it in 2020, but I hope we'll have some fun in 2021.
So when this pandemic's over, we got to go hit some rounds of golf then.
You got it. You got it.
A lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that. So because of your work to improve student success over the years, you have this national presence. You do a lot of work. You do a lot of engagements throughout the country. A lot of your work has been around diversity, equity, inclusion. Can you unpack that work that you've been doing with colleges?
Well, as you know, both of us share a real important connection to the work around guided pathways in the country. This idea that we should have experiences for students that are structured, that provide them opportunity to get access to the kind of life that they deserve. And that begins with the end in mind, helping them to determine the path and how to get on the path and stay on the path and earn and grow and become the aspirations that they have for themselves and even achieve things that they could not have thought about for themselves. Our institutions are in this process of learning how themselves to grow. We oftentimes think of students as the only ones that are learners, but I would argue that institutions have to be learners if they are going to be effective. And one of the areas right now that we need to help institutions learn and grow in is in the area of equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, we have in the community college space really focused significantly on access and trying to make sure that students get into the institutions. And that's a start. We have talked in meaningful ways about inclusion, trying to get people to feel like they have a sense of belonging. And that's a part. But equity, this idea that outcomes are going to be achieved by thinking deeply about the systems that produce the outcomes, that requires a plan. And from my point of view, student success is going to be ineffective if we are not thinking about the critical junctures of the student's experience, but also the critical junctures of the experience of the employees of the institution that actually are responsible for partnering with the students to produce those successful outcomes. And so I think, you know, people get comfortable with diversity because diversity makes us feel good. Everybody should be included. Everybody gets a t-shirt, you know, but is everyone's t-shirt a t-shirt that fits them? You know, are we making sure, you know, hey, everybody can dance on the dance floor, but do we have enough music so that everybody can have the music that they're in tune to be a part of the experience? How are we ensuring that people's opportunities are significant and real? And institutions often like to talk about what's wrong with students and don't always like to talk about what is wrong with the institutions that ultimately don't allow the students to reach the goals and aspirations that they have.
I have a series of quotes that I've shared throughout the years. One of them is, institutions achieve student success when college educators help each other succeed. And it seems like I really appreciate what you said, because when you're on an airplane and they do the safety speech, right? What is it that they tell you about the mask? That you got to put it on first, right? Before you put it on a child. And often equity, I mean, it is important. It's critical for students, but we don't often think about equity for the employees. So can you unpack some more then, given that is your philosophy, what are some nuts and bolts things that you've done to help raise awareness and improve diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, let me start by giving a framework, because I think that institutions that have a framework are then able to sort of have a starting point, some measurements, some ways to move the work forward, which is why I think a lot of the work around guided pathways has been so helpful for institutions interested in institutional redesign, because it provides sort of a way of thinking, a way of approaching the matter. If we are going to look at equity as an equity-based reform strategy at institutions, we first ultimately have to answer the question, why? And so I think more than anything else, institutions must answer the question, why should we engage in equity-based reform? Now, there are a whole host of reasons why institutions should do that, but unless an institution has done that work of conversations within the community to actually lift voices, often voices that are not heard in that conversation, you don't get to the why. And if you don't have a commitment to the why, we know that transformation doesn't happen if there's not a commitment to the why of the transformation. And so I think in our institution, I'm president of Rockland Community College, as you mentioned, we started our work with first, of course, important statements, but we have a program called Steps Beyond Statements. Because while you have statements, and statements are important, if you don't then come with specific steps that you're going to take to bring to life the platitudes that you espouse, then ultimately you can't be effective. You may have a wonderfully well-written and thought of mission statement, a vision statement, value statements. They may be glorious. They may give you a sense that you really are an anti-racist, equity-focused, justice-oriented institution. But if you can't kick the tires of those statements by the critical junctures of the student experience and the outcome of students in those junctures, or the critical junctures of the employee experience and the outcomes of those employees at those junctures, then it's statements and no steps. So let me go into a little bit of detail about sort of the student experience, and then I'll go into some detail about the employee experience for those practitioner listeners who basically say, yeah, we want to do equity-based reform, but we don't know exactly what that means. You have critical junctures that really have come to sort of, solidify the student experience. Now over a decade of work that we've done around the country in the Guided Pathways movement, from completion by design, from Guided Pathways Institutes, from all of the different things that we have done. We've talked about pillars and those sorts of things, but I really focus on the lost momentum framework of completion by design as a very important framework to look at for purposes of assessment. In the student experience, you have 4 critical junctures. Connection. How are we getting the students interested, and how are we helping them apply to our institution? Entry. What does that first year experience look like? Progress. After they finish those gatekeeper courses and move into their first year, they've completed the first year. So to what extent are we monitoring their progress? Are we doing just-in-time interventions so that we have the best opportunity to improve the outcomes? And then, of course, completion. Are they completing credentials of value that will enable them to be effective in the marketplace as they go into work, or as they go into, a 4-year program or whatever? And some would add transition. If you're an ATD school, you're going to know, you'll add transition. But I want to stick with those 4 for the purposes of this conversation. At each of those junctures, there are equity questions that you can ask. Think about connection. To what extent are you having the kind of incoming classes that are reflective of the community? To what extent are you steering students in their connection process into academic programs that are going to give them a viable chance for a good life and a good living? How are you examining their opportunities? And if there are students who don't have minimum basic qualifications in programs because their primary education was not what it needed to be, what boot camps are you doing for them in advance in the connection process so that they can be given the supports necessary to have viability in STEM fields, for example, where ultimately there's a lot of economic opportunity, but sometimes students come in and they don't have the primary skills based on the institutions they were in before they got to you. So how are we looking at that? Are we taking poor people and steering them into academic programs that are going to keep them in poverty? Those are the kinds of questions that we have to ask from an equitable perspective and connection. And you can do the same analysis at the junctures. When you think about the first year experience, if you disaggregate the data, how many people are in first year seminar classes and how many of them have educational plans and finance plans and career plans, and how many of them have mentors that are helping them to monitor those plans and making the adjustments, who in the progress phase is actually doing the intervention so that they can complete the courses, that they can maintain momentum, that they can actually move forward into the aspirations, who's telling them what semester they need an actual practical learning experience, whether it's an internship or a volunteerism opportunity, so that they can have a competitive advantage as they move into the transition phase. Who's helping them with the applications? Where, when you look at where the students are going, if they're transferring to four-year institutions, is there a disparity in the types of institutions that people go to from race, ethnicity, gender, those classifications? So as you look at those critical junctures, there are systems that are connected to each of those critical junctures that you have to interrogate. You have to interrogate your application system. You have to interrogate your recruitment system. You have to interrogate your system of placement of students within first year seminar classes. You have to interrogate the systems that allow people to look at what places they want to transfer to. Are you going to help people do transfer applications to institutions where they can go to higher quality institutions, but because they don't know, you haven't given them the academic counseling to get them to the places that would lift their prospects post-baccalaureately. So all of those are systems at these junctures that are currently producing the outcomes your institutions have. And so if we really are going to be serious about equity-focused reform, you have to look at outcomes first and disaggregate data and the systems that are producing those outcomes to determine what your strategy will be at each critical juncture of that student's experience, so that you can improve the overall institutional outcomes if this is truly a priority beyond your statements. And so guess what? Now I'm going to shock everybody. That too works for employees. So in the connection phase for students, I call it candidacy for employees. Because guess what? The candidates that are going to come to your institutions, they have to go through a process. So what is your recruitment process? And what is your sort of the composition of those who are sitting around the table with you, deciding who gets to be a part of your community? How diverse is that? You know, when you go to the entry phase in the student experience, is what I call the new employee experience. What is the first year of that new employee? Do they have a professional development plan? Do they have a mentor? Do they have opportunities to see themselves as contributors to your community in meaningful ways, so that they can build a pathway within your institution? In terms of professional development, which would be the progress phase, are they getting committee assignments and opportunities to write and present at conferences? Because those will probably be gatekeeper experiences if one day those faculty members want to have ranked tenure and promotion opportunities, or if your other staff want to be promoted to higher levels of authority within the institution. And when they leave, transition, what exactly, if you both started on the same day and you both leave on the same day, we should make sure that both of those people, irrespective of race, irrespective of gender, and irrespective of sort of intangibles, that they should be able to walk out with a similar package and have a similar connection to the college. All of those are very specific systems. Your HR system is a system. Your recruitment system is a system. Your ability to do rank, tenure, and promotion is a system. How people get committee assignments is systems. These are all systems that, if we look at the systems and we look at the outcomes presently that those systems that are currently in existence provide, and we begin to work on that, then your statements actually have steps that change outcomes that actually improve institutions. So from my perspective, it is wonderful to say we are anti-racist. It is wonderful to say we value everybody. We love everybody. It's important. And you have to have some sentiments. You have to be able to stand on your values. Your values are, we have a value for diversity. Like, you should be able to, but Taco Tuesday is not diversity. Okay. Having ribs and chicken and for Black History Month, that's not diversity. Having one person who happens to be a person of color on one committee a year is not diversity. That one person the chief diversity officer is not the chief diversity officer. Everybody has to be a part of the diversification of our institutions and to make us what I would call inclusively excellent. That is a process which has starts and plans and execution, and everybody has to be a part of that. And so from my perspective, we've had a lot of people give a lot of reports. I love all of the presentations at all of our campuses where we say, well, equality is not equity, and this is the ladder on the box or the fence and whatever like that. We are beyond that. That was first grade. Educational institutions that are really interested in doing something have within their ability to do something. It doesn't matter how many unions you have. I have 5 unions on my campus. Doesn't matter how many unions you have, or whether your state funds you well or doesn't fund you well. It's your institutional prerogative to determine and design what the experiences are for students and employees.
As you know, I use the momentum points, the Lawson momentum points for example, student success team work. I say, here's a framework for you to use. When I work with campuses to create their ed master plan, the strategic plan, I fold in the framework that you mentioned. What I'm learning from you is that having a framework for your staff, for the employees. Culture is a stubborn thing to change, right? And so if we're going to work on a framework for students, we need to have people have beyond buy-in, right? Buy-in is, I agree with this. They need to have ownership.
Mm-hmm. And so they need to have co-creation. For me, I've never subscribed to buy-in. Mm-hmm. If we co-create, we got a better chance of refining and agreeing and then defending. I don't need you to just be sort of I don't believe in governance that is non-participatory. I don't believe in what I call perfunctory governance. Perfunctory governance is where we just get to say, well, we agree with the decision of the faculty, or we agree with the decision of the administration, or we disagree with the decision of the administration. So what? When you have participatory governance, we sit down, we outline what's at stake. We are transparent and we redefine what transparent is. That means not you get to veto everything or approve everything, but with the things that you have the right to veto and approve, you will have a voice, and the things that you don't, you'll know about it. So that it's transparent. I think we don't make very clear to many in the institution what role governance plays. Participatory governance says we work together on things that we can work together on, and we inform you versus involve you when there are areas that you don't have a responsibility to be. But you have to be able to be transparent about that, because otherwise, when you don't go to folks and tell them every little thing, then you're not being transparent. No, you have not defined transparency. There are things I'm held accountable for that you ain't held accountable for. So the things that I'm held accountable for, you're informed. You're not involved. The things we together work on, then you're involved. And then we inform those who have authority over us. So, but that is part of the process if we are going to help institutions grow and get stronger. And I have found that, unfortunately, well, like you were just talking about that buy-in stuff, it's like buy-in is trying to make people think that what they don't like or what they really don't want to do, that some kind of way they're going to say, okay, well, we yield, we'll do. No, that's not going to strengthen your institution.
You're talking about transformational change. And in transformational change, there are people who, for a variety of reasons, fight it. I find more often than not, it stems from fear, just the fear of change. Mm-hmm. That's why I really appreciate you mentioning that you have a quote unquote student journey, but it's an employee journey framework where you can have these conversations. But even within that framework, what have been some obstacles that you experience where people still have kind of that healthy skepticism about it? And how do you get them to co-create when they're still against the fence?
Well, I think that you can't decide that people are wrong because they don't want to participate or they have a contrarian point of view. And I think that what ultimately happens in some institutions is they begin to demonize the people who don't agree with you, and you begin to ostracize them. And that is not helpful. From my perspective, you allow the voices of opposition to give you alternative visions that move things forward. And oftentimes I found that those who are not able to articulate the why or how you could do a thing differently, ultimately, over time, if at least don't become obstructionists because they can't contribute to the conversation. But you can't take those people who you disagree with or who are the opposition and act like they're Uncle Fred or Aunt Janie that you're going to lock in the cellar somewhere because you don't want them to be seen or heard. Like that doesn't work, because then that's exactly what they say. Well, they don't want to hear me. I'm going to say this, but I know everybody doesn't want to hear what I have to say. The same people oftentimes who say to me, why don't we have somebody look at the water shortage in the left building? It's the same person I'll say, great. Look into the water shortage in the left building and let me know what we need to do to address it. And what are you committed? So when you come back with a solution, make sure you're not giving other people work. Tell us what you're going to do. Because what people like to do is to decide what other people can do and not take ownership about what they should be doing or what. So before you come back to me with a solution that provides a job for somebody else and more work for somebody else to do, tell me what you're going to do. Tell me what we collectively have to do to actually resolve the problem that you raised. And I think that's the way to approach it. I think that you're never going to get 100% of the people on your side, no matter what you do. If you give ice cream, wonderful ice cream for free on a hot day, some people are going to say it's too cold. So our goal here is not to get everybody to blindly agree or go along. It is to say to the majority of the masses, here's how we can do it. And if you have ways to make it better, we're open. And then really be open.
In your work in transformational change, you mentioned the word systems a lot. Mm-hmm. And you often have to work you always have to work within the system that you inherit. Mm-hmm. And part of all community colleges, as you know, they for the most part are run through committees, right? A committee structure, a participatory governance structure that can often get in the way because of the miscommunication or the lack of coherence within or among the different committees. So even when everybody's well-intentioned, they have the why, they try to co-create, there's still that obstacle of just how community colleges are built with these committees. Have you put any thought to that or have done any work to reimagine that committee structure so that they can actually achieve this transformational work that they're all willing to co-create in?
I don't have many standing committees. I have work groups. Work groups are time limited. Work groups oftentimes get staff assigned to them, temporary staff that is assigned to help them do some of the administrative work so that you're not depleting the folks' ability to do the day-to-day job that they're getting paid for as they do this additional work for the betterment of the institution. I believe if you're going to have a whole bunch of committees and you're not going to, as an institution, appropriately resource them with technical support or, adjunct support in some meaningful way, then you're asking people who are already stretched to do more and not get anything from it. So from my perspective, I don't believe in these big, long committees. I believe in focused action learning projects with dedicated support staff, and it does not have to be permanent full-time professionals. It can be a consultant, it can be an adjunct professor, it can be someone that gets a little release time to help do some of the administrivia, with the committee being lean, with tight timelines and actionable outcomes that then are communicated to the community, so people don't feel like we just ran around in a circle. People who know me know I do not like lots of committees that take forever and don't go anywhere and are limited to a few little people. I think you have to have good, broad coalitions that focus intently on specific topics, who have a time-sensitive structure and administrative support to get it done within that time frame. And then appropriate resources to follow up and integrate and scale as best as you can. So that's, and I agree with you that there are a lot of people who are in governance. I do not agree that there are a lot of people in participatory governance. There are a lot of people who are in perfunctory governance. They're the up and down voters. They just want to, they want to analyze. They want to criticize. They want to complain. I'm not interested in the complaint department. We actually let those people go. There's no more complaint department at the college. So really what we want are people who are action oriented, who are going to get things done, that are going to make meaningful contributions. They're not going to get everything they want, but they're going to get some of the things because they have to be tied to our strategic directions, not our strategic plan, because as COVID-19 proves, that can be blown up. But strategic, we still have to be working in a strategic set of directions. We should be moving in a specific way. When I came into my college, we cut down lots of committees, decommissioned committees, set up working groups, made sure that they were diverse perspective and positions, and time sensitive, appropriately administratively staffed, producing implementation plans with some sort of check on how the implementation is going over time. Without that cadence of execution, institutions are ineffective.
Well, Michael, you're getting rid of my committee, and that's it's been here for 20 years, and we have a budget.
Yes, and what has it produced? And what are our aspirations? So let's now look at your work as the legacy, as the foundation, and what are we now aspiring to based on that foundation? And so if we think about it from that perspective, and I always say this to folks, put me in a position to ask somebody for money to bring you to the next level. Put me in a position, because of the foundation work you did, and now the reimagining you work you want to do, that I can go to a philanthropic agent, a donor of some sort, to now resource the next leg of your journey, if it is successful, and if it aligns with our strategic directions.
And as president, I find I have the privilege of working with so many presidents that it's so important to have a strong bench. And what I mean by that is really strong VPs, really good working relationship with faculty, specifically the academic senate president. What's your approach? And I'm not suggesting this is at Rockland, but in previous experiences where the benches maybe can use some improvement, if you will?
You start with improvement, and if that doesn't work, they have to leave. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't do big things if you have small-minded people. Mm-hmm. So you coach, you encourage, you inspire, and then you invite to leave if it doesn't work. I just think that you can't spend too much time to improve outcomes without investment. So I believe very, very firmly in professional investment at all levels. And then, as a president, you have to be honest with whether this investment is bringing a return to the institution or not. And it may not be that the person is bad. It's just that they're not able to contribute here for where you're going now. They may have been phenomenal where you were, but if they're not able to contribute to where you're going, then you have to be honest with them. You have to support them. I'm not the type of person to say, okay, well, get rid of people right away. No, I don't believe in that. I believe that you have to make sure that you're clear about your expectations, that you adequately support people, that you give them information along the way, so that if a person is ultimately asked not to continue service with you, it should not be a surprise. It should not be a surprise to them or anybody else in the institution, quite frankly, if everyone is really coalescing around our larger strategies. And so I think that you are humane and you are decent and you are honest in how you work with people, how you support people, but that you are clear that we have objectives and we are creating an environment that actually requires a certain level of engagement. And for those who are ill-equipped at that level of engagement, or if you're in the wrong place, sometimes you got the right people in the wrong place. And so you have to be willing, in our institution, yes, some of the senior leaders I started with were not there, early on because we needed to move a little bit differently. But much of the sort of restructures and how people rose, the majority of the people that got higher positions in my time at the college have been people who have been at the college, who didn't see themselves as more than what they were because they weren't put on committee opportunities and they weren't given an opportunity to have their voice heard. And they weren't able to enact some of the things that they wanted to do, that they saw were wrong, that they believed could improve things because no one gave them a voice. And I think if you're a president, a practitioner president, see, I'm a practitioner president, so I understand the work at very deep levels. And I don't try to stay in the weeds to tell people what to do as a micromanager. But if you're not conversant with the various areas, then you can't coach your people to coach their people. And so as a practitioner president, it's important to me to make sure that people have support, professional development. And if this is not the right environment, let us get them to an environment that's better for them and for us.
One of the many things I appreciate about you, and I learned about this when we first met, is you talked about coaching, which I've made this. This has been my work, and you are a coach at your campus. And I remember you unpacked. I think you had some C's in there.
Yeah, sure.
I got my own C's, but I appreciate yours as well. Can you explain
It's the L's. It's the L's.
Oh, it's the L's.
It's the L's. I have these L's where I talk about, you have to have, there has to be a lot of levity. You know what I'm saying? You have to be able to lift people's spirits, so there's levity that has to be there. There is leverage. You have to understand how you balance all the competing priorities with all the possible opportunities. So you've got to kind of have that leverage. There's got to be learning. You as the coach have to be a learner, not just a teacher. If you're going to be effective, don't tell everybody what you know until you understand what they know. And then you try to fill in to the things that they know and sort of and grow there. And of course, in everything, you have to have love. You have to love your people, and you have to create an environment where they have the best chance to truly love the student. That doesn't mean giving the student whatever they want, agreeing with the student, supporting students, things that are not right. But it is that they know that they are going to be supported in the things that they do and say, that they are going to have resources. You do not have to be a rich institution to resource your people. Your people can be resources. Do you know how many coaches you have at your institution that you don't even realize have the capability to coach? And so to what extent are you leveraging your own internal resources to make sure that people can move forward? How are we making sure that we have interdisciplinary teams when we are making decisions, so that the person who is responsible for implementing is also at the table, who can say, well, it'll be hard for me to do this and this and this if we don't do that. So it is when you're coaching, you are a learner, and you have to listen. You have to listen more than you speak. That's why you have those, 2 ears and 1 mouth. So you got to listen. You have to learn. So that means you got to make sense of what it is that you are listening to. You have to recognize the power of leverage. How can you use all of these different ideas and the experience of your people to really leverage it, and as well as the external community? How do you bring levity to the conversation? How do you make sure that everybody understands it's hard work, but it doesn't have to be like, like we can't laugh, we can't have some fun, we can't have some sense of connection to one another. And you got to love the students, you got to love the work, you got to love your coworkers.
Well, I love you, man.
I love you too, my brother.
That's just beautiful. Because you have a framework, you create common language at your campus for both students and employees. Because you are able to reimagine and help clean up, if you will, the committee structure and have more of these work groups, which I'm sure you embed these internal coaches, right, into these different work groups, is how you create, build, and continue to have momentum and get results over time. One of the questions I have is, because students spend most of their time in college in the classroom, and at the end of the day, it's a teaching and learning institution. We've seen the data. We've seen these stories countless of times. So, for example, I'll pick chemistry. There's a chemistry instructor who has a 80% student success rate. Another one has a 25. And when you disaggregate it, it's even worse for disproportionately impacted students. Same content, very different outcomes. So we're not talking about a work group, a committee, or a VP. We're talking about faculty who we can't just say, well, it's 20%, see you later if they're tenured. So how do you help that faculty member that consistently has that 20% student success rate?
The question is, does the faculty member want the help? Does the faculty member understand the challenges? Does the faculty member even understand if they have withdrawals? We look at withdrawals. When in the semester are the majority of students withdrawing? Are they really withdrawing at the end? Are they withdrawing in certain specific weeks? Because maybe that is where we need to bring in academic intervention, so that in the more difficult parts of the class, the students have the supports so that they can successfully complete the course. To what extent are you getting the faculty member help from other faculty members in terms of those sorts of things? And to what extent have you empowered the deans that are responsible for the area, and the program directors responsible for the area, to help the faculty, to get the faculty member the support that the faculty member needs to be successful? So you have to start from the position of, have we as an institution provided this person the resources and the tools to be successful? And in the process, have we also provided the students who are currently being instructed by that faculty member the supports in real time? As the instructor can improve, we're still making sure that the student has a quality experience. When you say, some of us say, well, send them off to the learning lab, but they don't go. So that's on them. They don't go. No, embed, this particular faculty member has a 20% success rate. That in this particular subject is where most of these people drop out. Why are we not embedding somebody? Why are we not saying to somebody from the academic support center that for these sessions, you're going to be supplemental instruction to assist to ensure that these students have a better opportunity and chance to successfully complete the curriculum? And faculty member, let's make sure that you have additional teaching supports so that you can be effective. And if not, then we have to take other steps. But you don't start with, your numbers are terrible. Oh, well, what you going to do about it? Because if you don't do nothing about it, we're going to do something about it. Like, that's not a strategy. And it doesn't help the current students in the current situation right now. So any faculty member that has poor outcomes and they happen to have high withdrawals in critical subject areas, when you look at the timeline of when students traditionally withdraw, you got to embed academic support clearly at this critical juncture of this particular course. And clearly, you got to provide additional supports for the faculty. And clearly, you will ultimately not want to have to reassign the faculty member to some other kind of thing that comports with your collective bargaining agreement, but that ultimately provides support for students in a different way. But all of your options, you can't disarm yourself either.
And I think what you've done with this structure that you set up to change the systems is that it allows people to have aha moments, I think, where we've had this notion that students don't come to us prepared. And I've tried to tell colleges, no, we're the ones that have to do a better job being prepared.
Yes.
And so this, when I hear people say, well, I make sure that I have a very rigorous content and curriculum, and so they're just not prepared for it. And then I also think about all the antiquated grading policies that are still out there. They're not equitable. I got to believe that with the structures, the processes that you set in place allow people to have these conversations, go back to the why, so people have these aha moments and have a more this mindset from external attribution, meaning that everything's external, blame it on the students, their background, but it shifts more to an internal attribution about what can I do to be better prepared. Is that do I have that accurate?
Absolutely. I think that every collective bargaining agreement should have a faculty provision that talks about professional development. And in that contract, it should say, if for whatever reason the faculty member is unable to meet certain minimum thresholds in terms of outcomes for student performance, that they automatically have built in an expectation that they're going to avail themselves of professional development, but also a corollary commitment from the institution to ensure that opportunity for that development is available. Because then you're not penalizing people, you're preparing people. At the end of the day, we can do whatever we want to do. And I'm going to tell you why you can do whatever you want to do. Because when COVID hit, all that stuff about I don't want to teach online went out the window. All that stuff about I can only do this time to this time went out the window. All that stuff about I don't do pass fail, all that's out the window. I can only have X amount. All the stuff that we said we can never do, all of what we could never do, we doing now. So, now is the time to say, listen, just schedule, blow it up. Blow it up. Where you want to, who you at. I want this classroom on the left side in the right corner. Blow it up. You ain't there now. I mean, now I know for some it's going like, oh my God, what are you talking about? This is the way we've always done it. And guess what? These are the results we have because of the way we've always done it. And you can't no longer make the excuse but I'll give you a perfect example. We closed the campus when it snows too hard, because the hard snow, people can't ride on the roads. We can't ride on the roads. The roads are crazy. You can't ride on the road. We closed the campus. Guess what? Not no more. Yeah, the campus may be physically closed, but you get on your Zoom and you have your classroom. There are no more snow days. So I mean, get with it. And understand that, for example, in the community college space, we are the one that took the biggest hit in enrollment. Those students who changed their mind about coming to college this fall, I think CCRC said it was like 2 times more likely that the community college person changed their mind versus the 4-year school. So the majority of our students changed their mind, and it's not just because they didn't like the online modality or they didn't have a Wi-Fi. Some of them had COVID, was scared of COVID, or took care of somebody that had COVID. I mean, that's just the reality. But you have a lot of people that still, from the groups that would normally come to us, went to the for-profits. They got 3% or better from clearinghouse data, 3% or better enrollment from the population that would traditionally come to us. They're more expensive. They have less support. They don't have as good as outcomes. And guess what? Our students went there. And they didn't go into their buildings. They went into their classrooms virtually. So you can't tell me that there's something wrong when we charge a fraction of the price with a whole lot more support, and students that would normally come to us, even in COVID, went there. So if we want that to continue to happen, we just don't do nothing. Just do what we've been doing. But if we want to make sure that people, can stay employed, not furloughed, not fired, if we want to make sure that people can stay, engaged in the communities and pay your mortgage and send Junior or Jeannie to college, we got to get with the program. If we want to be competitive, we have to understand shorter term credentials. People can't stay, 4 years for a 2-year degree. They can't. And they are not going to stay for that long. So we better figure out what these accelerated studies are going to look like and what you do in the winter session and what you do in the summer session. Wow, you're going to have to do that in the fall and in the spring. You're going to have to figure out that the sacred cow of scheduling is not going to work. Not in this environment with the whole shift. You got to understand that your old programs that you love so much that nobody actually goes to can't stay on the books when business and industry is hitting the reset button and we haven't. They're going to create jobs that don't exist now. 5G, telecommunication, you're going to see great advances in that area. Zoomcasting is a job people actually do for a living, putting together Zoomcast. Well, guess what? If we are not thinking about how business is resetting because of COVID's reset of everything, and we just go right back to, well, let's roll over the calendar from let's roll over the schedule. We do that roll over the schedule, we will increase the market share for for-profit institutions who will gladly take students that look like students that come to us and charge them so much more than we ever would, and ultimately put them at a disadvantage, and we should do better and can do better.
You're such a forward thinker and inspiration for people who doesn't matter where they are at the college, if they have aspirations of one day being a college president. As you know, there's faculty that become college presidents, folks from student services. I even know presidents who have a background in institutional research who became presidents.
Right.
What advice would you give them as they aspire to be a president?
Mark Sanborn wrote a very little book that's a very important book that I used to give to a lot of my students. You don't need a title to be a leader. And in that book, he basically lays out what the ROI is in your work. It's not your return on investment. It's your relationships, its outcomes, and improvements. It does not matter what position you have at your college. Build good relationships. If you can build good relationships, it will broaden your knowledge. It will put you in a place where you'll learn to ask the right questions. Half of the job of being president is understanding the right questions to ask. It's not so much of you being such a great visionary. If you don't know what questions to ask, your vision is always going to be myopic. So really it is understanding the relationships so that you learn, so that you can ask the right questions. The second thing, is outcomes. So what have you done? Because that's what people want to know. Not what you're going to do. What have you done? And that is important because if you can't do little things well, what would ever make us think that you could do big things well? If you can't manage $5, why should I give you 50? If you can't manage 50, why should I give you 50,000? If you can't manage 50,000, how you think I'm going to give you 15 million, 20 million, 60 million? Why would I do that? So what are your outcomes? And then lastly, improvements. How have you improved the lives of the people that you were blessed and favored to work with? How have you improved the lives of students? How have you improved the lives of your coworkers, those who work for you and those who work with you? How have you improved the lives of the people in the community? What improvements have you made? Did you find a dusty place and it's still dusty as you on your way out? Or did you find a place that had promise and you did your best to make sure in a very collaborative way you made it better? I can say when my time is done at Rockland or wherever in life, whatever opportunities that I'm presented, whatever I've ever done. When I was at LaGuardia, I felt the same way. When I was at Berkeley College in New York, I felt the same way. That my job is to build good relationships, to provide outcomes based on my efforts and understanding and hard work, and things improved. So I don't care wherever I've ever been, that has been my goal. Have good relationships, show the outcomes that you want to obtain, and improve wherever you've been. And if you do that, you'll be president, you'll be wherever you want to be and do whatever you want to do, because those, to me, are what will give you influence. Title is not influence. Your ability to have relationships, outcomes, improvements, that's influence. Vernon Jordan had influence and no title. And he worked effectively with Democratic presidents for many, many years. I encourage folks to read the book Vernon Can Read. Take a look. Here's a guy who came from humble beginnings and ultimately became an advisor to presidents. It's you can have people. Valerie Jarrett. Who knows what Valerie Jarrett actually did before becoming a senior advisor to the president? But her influence, you don't know all her background. Most people don't know. So, and on and on and on and on. It's like there are a lot of people that don't have president. There are a lot of people that don't have big fancy titles, but they are extraordinarily influential. Nobody even knew Mackenzie Scott's name other than that she had broke up with her husband. But now she got influence. $4.1 billion handed out to many institutions like ours to help folks get ahead in life. Influence. Now, she probably will never want to be the president of a foundation or president of a college or president of nothing. That's not her thing. But her influence is profound.
Thank you for that. Again, that's so inspirational. We are brothers from another mother, because you were so kind to read I put together a guide. I felt it's just so necessary to explain why colleges struggle to implement priorities, and I provided some suggestions on what to do about it. And I start and end with kindness, and I talk about relationships and student frameworks. And so thank you for reviewing it and giving me input on that. Really appreciate it. And this last piece about the ROI, right? I'm not a big fan of MBA talk and synergy and synergistic and ROI, but you gave ROI meaning, and it starts with those relationships. I have the privilege of working with so many faculty, for example, on Guided Pathways work, and they're not presidents, they're not even VPs, but some of these faculty, what they're doing to improve the student experience and student outcomes, because they have the relationships. They got the street cred, and they love their students and yeah, they don't always get along with the family, right? But they try their best, and they move toward getting results because they're just so good at that relationships. So you make such an incredible point there, such a meaningful point. So we're winding down here. I can't thank you enough for participating in my inaugural Student Success podcast. Are there any last words of wisdom that you would like to impart?
Well, I want to thank you, Al, for always being on the forefront out here trying to help people really improve the lives of students and institutions and communities, because that is so critical in these days and times. I love working at our college, at Rockland and other colleges around the country I have the opportunity to work with. I love working with faculty. Quite frankly, I am a faculty member. I teach at Rockland in the semesters where I'm not bumped because I'm an adjunct, and so I'm the president, but I'm not on the pecking order in my department. So if there's this more senior person who wants my teaching spot, they get it. So I have been bumped from teaching sometimes, which is fine because I want people to understand that I mark papers with no teacher's assistant. I have to fill out the grade book. I have to learn mind tap and go through, the blackboard and all that. So for my faculty, they understand that I understand. I ask questions. Why are we filling out everything on these little green books? Why can't we do this electronically? And now it's for everybody now. But the president went through it himself at this campus and sat in front of, stood in front of 20 people every other night to help them understand introduction to business or introduction to paralegal studies, because I'm an attorney too, like all of that. So I understand firsthand. And I've been teaching since when I was at LaGuardia, and even when I was at Berkeley, I was an adjunct there. So I want people to understand you don't just stand as a sage on the stage. So you are the guide on the side, not just with the students, with the faculty and the staff. Before I was a president or a vice president, I was a dean. I was photocopying the orientation materials and putting the packets together to get students ready for the first day of school. I wrote the graduation scripts so that we can make sure that we stayed on time for graduation. So from my perspective, when you have that kind of experience, that's why you can have a different kind of love for your people. And I would just say to all of your listeners that always stay humble, always stay hopeful, always stay recognizing your ability to be impactful.
What a way to end. Thank you so much for participating. Love you, brother.
Love you, my brother.
Thank you for listening to the Student Success Podcast. Each episode has show notes, which include helpful links and necessary follow-up information to help you get results. Please consider subscribing to the Continuous Learning Institute website. There are no advertisements. It's simply updates about articles, tools, resources, podcasts, etc., all tailored for you, the practitioner. Thank you.